All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. After 13 years of calling the shots for the Toronto Raptors as their team president and vice chairman, Masai Ujiri and the organization have decided to part ways. Now, the timing of this decision was odd, as the announcement came one day after the conclusion of the NBA draft. But this apparently had been brewing for some time, as Ujiri reportedly knew his fate, that his time was coming to an end in Toronto for at least a month. Nonetheless, reports of the rift with Ujiri and the Raptors, it goes back several years after he signed his last contract extension with the team. Of course, Ujiri had one more year left on his deal, but nonetheless, the decision was made to not bring him back. Now, you think about Ujiri's time in Toronto, and it was the highest of highs and it was the lowest of lows. For the first 7 years that Ujiri was with the Raptors. They made the playoffs. And of course, that was highlighted by Toronto winning their first and only NBA championship back in 2019. But since then, it's been such a steady decline for the Raptors. As since the 2021 season, Toronto has only made the postseason one time. They have not won a postseason series. And then, you know, the first big domino to fall for Toronto after they won that championship, of course, was Kawhi Leonard deciding to leave and go to the Clippers. And, it was one of those with Ujiri. He knew, and Toronto knew that it was a gamble for them to go out there and get Kawhi from the San Antonio Spurs. They gave up DeMar DeRozan. Of course, it worked because Toronto was able to win an NBA championship, but very rarely do you see a star player help win a championship with an organization and want to leave. But of course, that's what happened when Kawhi joined the Clippers. It was one of those where they tried to keep the machinery going. I mean, you go back to the following year, Toronto had won. They went 53-19 in that shortened NBA season. Of course, in the playoff bubble, they got to the second round, but after that, it was the beginning of the end. They played uh, their home games for the 2021 season on the road. They were in Tampa, and then from there, they came like slowly but surely. This thing started to get dismantled. It was one of those, we saw the departures of so many key players from that championship squad, the likes of Kyle Lowry, Fred Van Fleet, and then, of course, the last big move was Pascal Siakam being traded to the Indiana Pacers. And nonetheless, the biggest part of that, all of these guys are still on NBA rosters right now, okay, and making impacts. But you look at the Raptors' failed rebuild because in recent years, Toronto's win total has not gotten better. They have not had a winning season in the last 3 years. Okay. And, this seems like an organization that is simply searching for answers. One could make a case that it's a failed rebuild, but it's one of those where when you part with guys and you rely on your system, it's never a guarantee that the guys coming afterwards are going to be able to have that same time impact. But nonetheless, for this Toronto organization, you know, one would ask, why was this decision made on the heels of the draft? And like I said, it's one of those where the writing was on the wall already. Okay. And it was just a fact of Ujiri was able to see the draft through for Toronto. They brought in Elijah Martin in the second round, Colin. Um, Murray Boyles was their first round pick, and there's hope that these two youngsters can, come in and blend in with a solid core that Toronto does have, in my opinion. But of course, the injury bug really did to the Raptors in last year. So we don't know what they could be, but nonetheless, you look at it. You've got Scotty Barnes, you've got R.J. Barrett, you've got Brandon Ingram, you've got Emmanuel Quickly. Okay, like I said, Colin Murray Boyles and an Elijah Martin. So there's definitely some talent there for Toronto to be better. They only won 30 games this past season. A lot of that was due to injuries. Okay, and they finished 11th in the Eastern Conference. But I'm here to say, if the Raptors are healthy for next season, they're not going to be 11th in the Eastern Conference. And of course, a lot of people feel that the East is wide open. I'm not here to say that Toronto is ready to contend for the top spot in the Eastern Conference, but they are better than being a 30-win team if everybody is healthy. But getting back to Ujiri, did he wear out his welcome in Toronto? He simply did. It sounds like it. It's one of those where 12 years is a long time, or 13 years rather, is a long time. And there are differences between decision makers within organizations. And I'm just here to guess, okay, because I don't have inside information. Maybe it was a power struggle. We don't know. But I think as the days and weeks and months progress, we are going to find out more information about this situation. Like I said, you look at this Toronto team, you still got general manager Bobby Webster. He's going to interview for Ujiri's old position. Maybe he gets it, maybe he stays in place. Everybody else, for the most part, in the front office in Toronto is going to be there. Okay, like I said before, this is on paper. This is not a 30-win team. They are much more talented than that. And I think at the very least, Toronto has the potential um, to be, for one of the top spots in the play-in, if not top six in the Eastern Conference, depending on how things look next season. I'll say this. Masai Ujiri knows how to put teams together. He did a solid job in Denver with the Nuggets before he left to join the Raptors team. And it's one of those, he simply knows talent. He knows how to put it together. Again, it was just one of those where they just let so many key guys from that championship team leave. That was a big thing. And it was unfortunate because we never really got to see if that Toronto team could have run it back. And of course, they still were a darn good team without Kawhi. But you got to wonder at this point, even if you're Kawhi, would you have rather have stayed in Toronto than gone home basically to the Clippers because it has not worked out for him there. And of course, unfortunately for Kawhi Leonard, he's just been unable to stay healthy. But nonetheless, this was a shock because it was kept on the wraps as far as Masai Ujiri and the Toronto Raptors. I think they're going to do what they feel is best for their business, for their brand. And I totally get it. I totally understand it. And now it's time for them to move on. But like I keep saying, the Raptors are better than being the 30-win team. A lot of that had to do with injuries. And I just want to see, because there's a lot of talent for the Raptors. I just want to see what they're going to look like if they come together and they're healthy for next season. That's the big if. But nonetheless, it's going to be a new person calling the shots for the Raptors in their front office. If I was a betting man, I would go with Bobby Webster. He's already been the GM. He's already been, there for so long. Like I said, they're keeping basically everybody else in the front office. So I think they want to keep that part of the stability going. And let's see what's next for this Raptors organization. So here, on the heels of the NBA draft, it's a shocker as Masai Ujiri, who basically has been so vital to the Toronto Raptors for quite some time, is no longer with the organization. But, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, if you like what you heard and saw on this podcast, you know what to do. Please feel free to hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. And like I always say, it is greatly appreciated. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 pounds of sports. And if you give me that follow, I'll give you that follow right back. And the same goes for Instagram, where you can check me out at 300 pounds of sports knowledge. Also, if you're on Facebook, you can check us out at the Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports groups going on the social media circuit. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.